The Minneapolis Police Department does not work with federal law enforcement for the purpose of conducting immigration enforcement. We don't provide information to federal immigration authorities.
Okay, here we go again. Another police department letting the Trump administration know we're not going to work with you when it comes to deportation operations. In fact, we're not even going to give you any information, according to the Minneapolis police chief.
So for you not to partner with ICE to make your community safer is shameful.
So Tom Homan is furious, but he's not surprised, because this is not the first time we've seen police chiefs or the mayor of a city say, we're not going to work with the Trump administration. But the reason why this situation really stands out is because of the amount of fraud that seems to be coming out of the state of Minnesota. In fact, here's a news article from the Washington Post. Tim Walz is crumbling along with his 2028 hopes, and the entire article is about the fraud that's coming out of the state. So of course there is an expectation. Why not work with the federal government to figure out what's happening in your state, to include deportations, because we're also finding out there is immigration fraud going on in that state. And here's the thing, ICE actually has posted a video where they arrest a community leader who has been charged with fraud back in 2005. Check this out.
A couple of teams out in Minneapolis on a target location.
Before the sun lit up the Minnesota sky, St. Paul Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Sam Olson and a handful of agents hit the road.
We're going after a Mexican national with a DWI. All right, so there's our minivan.
For weeks, agents researched today's targets. They knew Joaquin Herrera Avila would be leaving his house early in the morning.
And we had to first figure out that he was here and then get that initial thing, and then it's going in to try to find, pattern of life. I think we had people even yesterday driving past to see if the vehicle was around.
So these guys are trying to find the first suspect who has a DWI. And remember, the local police, they're not going to work with ICE to give them any information. Why would they not work with ICE in this situation? I have no idea, but that's their policy.
A short time later, it was time for the next one in downtown Minneapolis. At first, we waited, but then our eyes were on the moving target.
See that gray Volkswagen that's passing us right now?
From all directions, agents followed and quickly pulled him over. Omar Abdi Jamal was arrested. We learned he is a known Somali activist in the area.
He's got some prior convictions for fraud for his entry into the U.S.
So those convictions happened back in 2005, which is why I highly assume that community leaders in Minneapolis are a little worried. Because if this well-known activist who got in trouble back in 2005, and his story is a little confusing as to why he was not deported, maybe I'll make another video about that. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm just trying to prove this happened back in 2005. He was ordered out of the country, he got to stay, but ICE doesn't discriminate. Even if you were charged back in 2005, that is on your record and they are still able to find you. So don't get it twisted. Just because we're now hearing about the fraud in 2025, it doesn't matter. ICE has all of the records and they can find you regardless of when this fraud could have happened, within the category of like illegal immigration and stuff like that. So now let's get to the statements of the police chief. Remember, in today's context, it's being reported that 100 federal agents, they will be surging to the city of Minneapolis, helping out the other ICE agents doing these deportation operations. But the police chief really wants to reiterate they will not be helping out at all, even though in that video we just saw somebody apprehended with a DWI and fraud conviction, not just a charge, conviction.
And from a public safety perspective, the fear of people to cause the police is something that to call the police in a time of need is something that harms everyone. We don't need that. If people are able to prey on certain people in our community, to victimize them, to rob them, because they think those folks are less likely to call the police, that makes everyone in the city less safe. It does absolutely nothing for public safety. So I just need to be clear, as our mayor has stated, the Minneapolis Police Department does not work with federal law enforcement for the purpose of conducting immigration enforcement. We don't provide information to federal immigration authorities. We don't ask people about their immigration status. Our mission is clear: to protect life, to uphold the law, and to maintain safety.
This right here is exactly why I started looking into sanctuary cities. I really wanted to figure out what exactly is going on with the police and not wanting to work with ICE agents. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it's still very confusing because we hear this all the time. A police chief who is saying what you would assume a police officer would say. We're here to serve and protect. That's great, but we're also not going to work with people who are trying to find criminals in our own city. And here's why Tom Homan called out the police chief. You're saying you're here to fight crime, but you're not working with the people who are in your city to fight crime.
Look, I'll say the same thing I said to other chiefs of police in sanctuary cities. Shame on you. I mean, your number one responsibility is the safety and security of your communities. And ICE is targeting criminals. Criminals. So for you not to partner with ICE to make your community safer is shameful. He ought to put his badge in the desk drawer and walk away because he stopped being a cop, become a politician. If a true law enforcement official would work with ICE, okay, look, I don't want to be an immigration officer. I'll leave that to you guys. But when we have an illegal alien public safety threat in the community, I want to be shoulder to shoulder with you.
And that's the part I truly think people don't understand, because statistically speaking, the mass majority of Americans do not like crime. That might surprise you, but 90%, if not more, Americans just don't like crime. That's why the Trump administration has really pushed forward this policy of safety. Americans tend to like that. But in this situation, Tom Homan is making the distinction. I understand if you don't like deportations, I totally get that. But what about an illegal immigrant who committed a crime? That part right there. Why are you not helping with the crime part? And then ICE agents will do the deportation part. That's not even happening in sanctuary cities.
I want to help you make my community safer because the chief of police, that's my number one responsibility. If he wants to watch, stand aside, do it. But if you cross that line, Pam Bondi and her U.S. attorneys are waiting to prosecute anybody that impedes law enforcement, ICE law enforcement, Border Patrol law enforcement in doing their job. Zero tolerance.
Hey, real quick, if you haven't already, make sure to please subscribe to my channel so I can keep you up to date with stories just like this. And if you are subscribed, you can also become a member. I made it as cheap as possible. You can't get any cheaper on YouTube. Scan the QR code. You can also become a member that way.
In our communities. Over the last 24 hours, I have addressed every roll call in this city, from last night into this morning. Not because of these news reports, but because I have been concerned. Both over the weekend, we've been getting reports, increased reports of immigration-related activity from members in our community. We can't verify that, but we know people in the community are heightened, and we also know that there have been incidents more recently. Two very recently in St. Paul around immigration enforcement.
Yeah, and that police department, they are being accused of working with ICE agents, and they are being accused of being way too violent towards the protesters. I'm not going to show you guys the clips. You guys can watch the two videos I covered in detail with that. Protesters were throwing objects at the police, yet the police are being blamed for being violent. But also, I want to point out, this police chief is saying, I'm concerned. Obviously, community members in the area, when you hear the head of your police department say, I'm concerned, and you involve this with deportations and immigration, obviously this is going to create some sort of environment in the city of, being concerned or being afraid. The guy who's supposed to protect our city, he's concerned.
So, our objective is straightforward as a police department. I want to try and minimize our officers' exposure to any of that type of enforcement activity and only respond when there is a legitimate public safety issue that we are responsible to our community to provide.
And here's what ends up happening. These police officers say we don't want to be involved. Okay, they have the right to do that. Whether we like it or not, local police departments do not have to cooperate with ICE. They don't, legally speaking. But here's what happens. A lot of times, protesters will show up, or advocates, and will get in the way, and will throw stuff at ICE, and then will cause some sort of disturbance. Whenever you watch one of my videos that have to do with clashing or protesting, that tends to be the main reason as to why that happens. Protesters go to the ICE agents, not the other way around. So then, of course, if you work in the police department and you see a crowd blocking an entire roadway or throwing objects, you have two options. You can either stand there and or leave, or you have to get involved. But if you get involved, it can be perceived as if you're working with ICE. And this right here is the problem the Trump administration has. You shouldn't have to be worried about wanting to calm down a crowd as a police officer. That is your job. And we saw this happen in Portland. We saw it happen for quite a long time in Portland, where the police were just staying out of ICE activity because they didn't want to get in trouble for working with ICE agents, even if that meant clearing out a roadway for people to just drive on through.
Moments like this, I know the tensions are high. I know how real the fear is in our community. People are going to want to speak out, to protest, and to exercise their First Amendment rights. Those are the rights of everyone in our community.
And by the way, no one is denying that. You absolutely have the right to protest. Please go out and protest. And if you hate ICE agents, you have that right as well. But the point here is that the police department also should have a duty to make sure things don't get out of hand and federal officers' equipment is getting destroyed, people are getting hurt, because the United States has to pay for the actions in which the police officers are not preventing.
And I want to be clear that we will absolutely defend people's rights to do just that. I also ask that if demonstrations do happen around any type of immigration raid, that they remain nonviolent so that we can keep everyone in our community safe, so that we minimize the risk of any tragedy happening or the immigrant communities that are already suffering to suffer that much more.
Now, whoa, hold on. This police chief could get in a lot of trouble for what he just said with the advocacy groups and protesters in the area. How could this police chief say, please don't get violent? It's not us who's getting violent. It's the ICE agents. It's the federal officers. It's the Trump administration. Why are you even talking about us? Now, to the majority of us, we would probably say, yeah, don't do anything too violent. You can protest, but don't cross that line. But you have to remember, and for those of you that are subscribed to my channel, I know you understand this, a lot of these protesters, they are fighting for this cause. They are willing to get arrested. They are willing to get pepperballed. So, they are expecting they're going to have some sort of support from their sanctuary city, like the police department and the mayor. You guys stay out of the way. We're going to do what we have to do, but you also need to make sure we are protected from these ICE agents. Again, this is the culture we see in a lot of these situations. We saw it happen in Portland, where at a recent board meeting, protesters were yelling at the city council members and saying, hey, we've been arrested, we've been pepperballed, where are you guys? Why are you guys not on the front lines with us in Portland? So stuff like this can absolutely happen. We have seen protesters turn on city council members and their own police departments because they felt like they were not getting enough support.
Says he does not want Somalis here in the U.S. The president going on to say that this new effort, this new ICE effort in Minneapolis and St. Paul, it's going to focus on Somalis that are here illegally with final deportation orders. In a statement to 5 Eyewitness News, ICE officials say their targets are not based on race or ethnicity, but on those who are in the country illegally.
Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country.
So right now, there is a very strong narrative that Somalis are going to be targeted specifically in St. Paul and in Minneapolis. And look, this makes total sense considering there are investigations right now from the Trump administration specifically targeting Somali groups involved with fraud. But that's not with deportations, that's something else. But when it comes to deportations and ICE operations, like you saw at the beginning of this video, the operation involves somebody from Mexico and from Somalia. And the operation they keep talking about over in St. Paul, that involves somebody from Honduras. So I completely understand why the Somali narrative is there. I mean, when you listen to what President Trump says about Somalia and you look at some of the investigations happening in Minnesota, a lot of it does have to do with Somalians. But when you cross-reference what's actually being done in this area as far as deportation operations, if you're here illegally, ICE ICE is going to investigate you and you could be deported, no matter where you're from.
He's always been a racist, a bigot, a xenophobic, and Islamophobic. We know that he called African nations a shithole in his first administration. We know that when he came down that escalator, he said he was going to stop Muslim immigration into this country. And so it is not surprising that he is going after black immigrants in this country. And it's certainly not surprising that he's choosing a black immigrant community that is also Muslim. But what I would like to say is that most of us are citizens. On our passport, it says we are nationals of this country. We love that Minnesota has welcomed us. Many of us have not been settled in Minnesota. We chose it as a home because the Minnesota people and the state is beautiful.
Okay, so leave your comments down below how you feel about what Congresswoman Omar just said. She is responding to what President Trump had to say. And remember, whether or not you like Congresswoman Omar, she has a ton of support from the Somali community in Minnesota. Now, I do want to point out at the beginning of this interview, Congresswoman Omar did say most of us are American citizens. Not all of us, but most of us. Now, I don't think the Trump administration would deny that there are legal Somali American citizens. I think the question the Trump administration has is, are we seeing some sort of fraud between American Somali citizens and illegal Somali citizens? I think that's what the Trump administration is trying to investigate. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will definitely be tracking what's happening in Minneapolis and St. Paul. We already have, but make sure to please subscribe, make sure to please like the video so you don't miss a thing. It looks like this might be a showdown, and I do hope it doesn't become violent. We don't want to see that, but one thing we do know is we saw what happened in St. Paul. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in Minneapolis. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. God bless, and we'll see you all later. Please pray for peace because we do need that right now.